I am so glad that you have joined us here at Auxano's webinar talking about capital campaigns in turbulent times. This is an exciting opportunity for us to get together. It seems like everything is complex these days, and so including those of you who are thinking about or are serious about raising some capital dollars to invest in your ministry. My name is Greg Gibbs, and I have a co-pilot with me behind the Powered by Auxano screen named Bob, and he's helped us kind of pull this all together. What I want to do is offer you the opportunity to today, we're going to go through this material, and then as we, hold on a second. Got to figure this out. Here we go. We're going to go back to this. Excellent. As we walk through this together today, we're also going to give you an opportunity to ask questions that will be part of actually a 30-minute quick answer your questions a week from today. We'll talk about that a little bit more later, but as many of you are joining us from around the country, I do want to say that I represent a team of people who help churches in all of the zip codes and all of the time zones. Again, my name is Greg. I want to offer you a very good morning. And I am the author of the Capital Campaign Playbook, but that is not as important as the fact that there's a team of folks who use that material to be able to help churches around the country. And so today, what I want to specifically address is that we live in turbulent times. You all know that. That's no news to you, whether it's being in a post-COVID America or whether it's being in what seems to be a economic something, right? What do you want to call it? We've got interest rate wackiness, and we have inflation and possible recession, and everybody speculates what that means, not just for personal finances, but also for what it means for the church, particularly churches like yours that may be needing some cash to kind of infuse into your ministry. So just real quick, we want you to say hello in the chat. You know how these webinars go, right? If you could tell us kind of who you are, where you're from, that would be fun to see who you are in terms of the places of the country that you represent, the churches that you represent. This call, we hope, will be about 40 to 45 minutes, so we're not even going to kill a whole hour of your day. And it could be a big thing for the future of your church. At least we hope it is. We hope that even today you will be inspired and encouraged. And of course, pop a question in the chat box. You can always email me, but again, if you want to hop back on next week, we'll address specific questions. You can get as minute as you want or as in the weeds as you want with your questions. Or if you have a macro or philosophical question about capital campaigns in churches, you can do that too. Okay, I don't want to delay too much. I want us to jump into what our content is going to be for today, which is divided into three areas: courage in complexity. I'm going to hopefully answer the question for you: what does it take to have courage in these complex times? Secondly, how do you still get capital campaign returns in a recession, if there is one? And again, I realize there's speculation and opinion about that, but it does feel like something's funky, right? And so that's why maybe you tuned in today, because you're like, Greg, we got to raise some money for our church, but is this the right time? Like, should we wait? Or how do you even outwait a recession? And then the last section that we'll talk about is, and I'm going to purport to you, this is my thesis: your next steps are now steps. In other words, you don't need to wait to get ready to raise money. As a matter of fact, I think over the years, capital campaigns have increased in their complexity. And so our team is always like, hey, let's help you jump in right now and start doing some analysis and things like that. So again, we believe that there is a way to faithfully and spiritually and pastorally raise money, not in a creepy way, not in a manipulative way. We are really a discipleship biased organization at Auxano. And if you know Auxano, you probably do, which is why you're on our list and you got marketing about this webinar. You know that we're all about discipleship, which means we can't do capital campaigns if we're not thinking about it as a deeply spiritually forming time for the people of your church. Okay, let's jump in. One of the things that I talk about in terms of having courage in complexity is the fact that right away I want to encourage you about clarity. When it comes to capital fundraising, you have to back up the train a little bit and make sure that we know not just the what do we want to do, but the why do we want to do it before we decide the when, like as in, is it time to do it? What I mean by that is often churches start with the what. And I don't want to accuse anybody of anything, but it's usually, oh, we need extra education space, or we need to remodel the sanctuary, or we need to buy a new building, whatever it is. And so we're like, we know what we need. We know the what. And yet churches seem to be a little bit less clear on why, like why now and why this project and what's so urgent about it, or what will make it more, what will make our ministry and our mission more effective as a result of having this thing, this expansion, this extra room, this extra building. And so as much as possible, we really do want to tie the what to our vision for who we are as a church and where we're heading. And then it becomes a little bit more clear as to when. For instance, maybe the when is right away, or maybe the when is, I think we should probably do this next year. So one of the reasons we're doing this webinar now is because we believe many of you may be thinking about the fact that you're like, I bet it's coming up pretty soon. Maybe even in early 2023, we're going to need to raise some money. But we just encourage you to know not just the what, but the why, and then you can decide the when. Secondly, we are completely ridiculously in love with this assessment process. That's a formal study that we do on behalf of senior leadership of churches to help remove a lot of the guesswork. I've been a senior pastor of a church, and I felt like a lot of times I was kind of flying blind. Like, I don't know whether we can raise this money, and I don't know whether this is the right time, and I don't know whether the people will buy into this or give money to it. One of the things that we do as a team is come in and get under the hood and help you assess, like, will the people give money? Because what I always ask senior leaders is, when would you like to find out whether or not the people are going to buy into this and fund it? I suggest it's not in the middle of a public phase of a campaign, but rather way ahead of time, so you can make adjustments if necessary. And so we strongly encourage a formal assessment of your congregation. And we can talk more detail about that whenever you want to, but it involves surveying people and maybe some interviews and some other things that we do to be able to analyze kind of where you're at and where you're headed. And then thirdly, I really think that we need to employ change management theory. Now, again, a lot of you men and women who are in senior leadership of churches, this is not new to you. You know Cotter's material on change management, or you're just an instinctive leader, and you know that people need to understand that what we're proposing is a better future than what we have now. People will only change when they can see that what could be is better than what we have right now. So the way I'm saying it is, people respond when next is better than the now. And so this is a little bit tied into the first thing about clarity, but it's a nuance to that, where it says, do you have your idea or your vision so formed in your mind and in your words that when you talk about it, people can say, aha, that sounds like a great future for our church. That sounds like we're going to be able to nail our mission even better than we do today. So that the logical next step for a member of your congregation is, of course we should fund that. Of course we should fund that. Whereas sometimes we haven't painted that picture clear enough. So what it sounds like in their ears is just, we need more money because we need more stuff. And their response could be, well, sure, I need more money and more stuff too, because you haven't given them how this could be better for your church and its ministry in the next. I want to just show you this. It looks like a lot. You don't need to read all the words, but I wanted to show you the process. And it starts from kind of the top right corner, the blue zone there called Discover, and it winds clockwise through Design and then Disciple. This is the process that we think has the complexity and nuance that is demanded of a modern, faith-based, discipleship-biased church capital campaign. In other words, you can't just throw a chicken dinner anymore and raise money. We think you need to kind of dig in and come alongside of experts like the Auxano team and just ask questions about clarity and assessing what our reality is, and then start to design a campaign that shapes a beautiful narrative about where your church is going and engage people, not just from the pulpit, but also in kind of meetings and things that aren't too much, but are just right when it comes to engaging a congregation. And then, of course, Disciple is all those ways in which we're using a capital campaign basically as an excuse or a platform to spiritually form people around what we believe is one of the principal issues of discipleship in all of Christianity, and that is, how do people handle their stuff that God has placed in their hands? And so we get excited about, yes, raising money, but we would feel like we didn't do you the best service if we didn't come alongside of you and say, how can we have the double win of both raising money and then also raising spiritual health and the temperature of discipleship in your congregation? So I want you to see this kind of wheel of process that starts in the top right, discover, and then design, and then disciple. And then this is literally the process that we walk churches through. And so this is where you can kind of achieve that clarity and the answers to the why and the what and the when. So when it comes to kind of just thinking through recessionary times, again, you've heard my caveat that everyone has a different opinion about this. And sometimes this is a national thing, which it sort of seems like right now. Other times it could even be a local economic thing. I want to encourage you with a few principles that will allow you to maybe still feel optimistic about raising money, even at a time of, let's call it, recession. One of the things I would call it insulation. And what I mean by that is often we'll talk about the 20%, almost in the sense of the Pareto principle of 20% of your congregation perhaps gives about 80% of the funding for almost anything you do. And of course you can, question that exact stat, but you understand the principle because you live in the world of the church. And so you know that a minority of people give a majority of the funding. Now, we pray all the time that everyone will participate in funding, but we know the reality that this 20% are a special group in that God has given them money, God has given them the desire to give money. And what I would say in my experience over the 25 years of doing capital campaigns is it's pretty rare that your 20% are completely deterred by market conditions. I think they're insulated from a lot of what happens in this recession. It may not be true about your congregation, but I would challenge you to think through the people that are actually giving the money in your congregation and the fact that, some of them, I guess, perhaps could lose a job or maybe not get a raise this year, but that's pretty rare. Those folks that have steady income and steady employment and are inclined to give are rarely deterred by a recession. The other thing that you need to understand is that when you can talk to people not about what would you give to the church right now, because then you're forcing them into a point in time decision, but rather you say to them, what could you do over the next couple of years if you're a married person, your spouse and God got together and you decided maybe what could God allow us to give over the next couple of years? Remember, that doesn't force people into a point in time decision. So if you say to me, hey, Greg, what can you give right now to our church? That's going to be a different answer than if you say, hey, Greg, what if you and your wife prayed about giving over the next couple of years? That's why people do pledge campaigns. Number one, it allows for them to have some time to work through some financial stuff. But I would say even in a time of recession, you're not asking them, what can you do right now? Because the right now thing may feel a little icky. Whereas if you say to them, you got a couple of years, that also may help you still get returns during a recession. And then finally, this is kind of the rainbow, right? The pot of gold at the end of the rainbow, the blessing in disguise, however you want to call it. When you take pledges during a time of economic funk, it becomes a very realistic pledge. As a matter of fact, our clients, even in normal conditions, the way we run campaigns, we'll see 90 to 95% of what is pledged actually given. So it's still a majority of the money is going to come in. But what we don't see is we don't see people kind of wildly or weirdly inflating their pledge, but they're super sober about it, right? They're like, hey, man, I'm not going to wing it with my church. I'm going to really tell them what I can give. And so now you're operating with real data. Like if your church pledges $500,000 for the capital project, that's probably going to come in, particularly when they pledge during a recession. So I just wanted you to feel the optimism of, you still can raise money even when kind of the newsprint and social media is telling everybody that the sky is falling. By the way, I want to give you kind of an insider tip on the way we look at the discover, design, disciple phases. And so if you're thinking about doing a campaign, we think you really need 3 quarters. And what I mean by that is a quarter of the year. And again, this is all malleable and it's not exact science, but we think in the discover phase, you need some time to kind of figure things out and analyze. And then in the design phase, you need some time to kind of put things together before you go public, which is the disciple phase. And so if you're going to try to string together a couple of quarters, the other thing we know is that Most churches don't want to raise money in the summer because people tend to not be paying attention. So we would purport to you that you're either going to do a capital campaign between Labor Day and Christmas-ish, or between New Year's and Easter-ish, like right around those two zones, right? Well, if that's the case, then you need to backdate that and allow yourself the 2 quarters ahead of that public phase. So let me just be super clear. If you're going to raise money in 2023, you can do it in early 2023, but that means you should be starting now with some of these phases that are ahead of it. Many of you, because you're not sure, maybe you're still trying to figure out, we know we need to raise money next year, but we're not sure when. I would suggest to you that you take kind of the winter, springtime to do the discover phase, maybe design things during the summer and then go public in the fall. I may be talking to a lot of people in this webinar that are thinking, when should we do a campaign? And if you need some time to still kind of refine what's going on and make sure you've got all your ducks in a row, I would suggest to you that you don't rush it. There's no reason to rush it. You can wait a couple of months or even a half a year to make sure you do it right. Because often a campaign will set you up for the next 5-10 years of ministry. So don't rush it by 6 months right now and then goof up what could be a great campaign if you had the time to do it. So if you have questions about that, you can ask those too, but I think you get the gist of it. We think there should be almost 2 full quarters of time ahead of the public phase to do it right and to do it in a way that doesn't feel quick and sort of down and dirty, but rather it feels lovely and pastoral and well thought out and professional. And then people really respect that. So again, you've heard me say right from the beginning, we think you need to take action now. So the next steps are now steps. For instance, here's what we suggest to every senior leader we work with. We suggest that if you don't have like a way to, in a white paper or a case for support, sometimes we call it, but if you don't have a way to write this out in 2 pages that's clear and succinct and understandable, like what are we doing, why are we doing it, what's it going to cost? Well, what we say is it's not ready until it's clear in 2 pages. And it's not clear until it can be summarized and understood in those 2 pages. So first action, which is a now step, is write it out. Secondly, test it. I've already referred to this, but once you have that 2-pager written out, we'll help you test that so that we can assess where the emotional and financial support will come from, or if it won't. Again, wouldn't you want to know that now so that you can refine and understand and go back to praying and discerning how God would have you to move forward? And then lastly, shape it. Once you kind of write it and then test it and get some feedback from people, now you have the opportunity to shape the way you'll do the communication during the campaign, as well as the financial target. Let me stop here for a second, because this is critical. One of the things we have learned, as I said, we're sort of ridiculously in love with our assessment process, is that once you give the congregation an opportunity to speak to, and by the way, anonymously respond to questions about a campaign idea, what they will reveal to you is the gaps in communication. In other words, they'll say, hey, we don't totally understand this, or we're not sure we buy into this, or can you explain this more clearly? And so when you get that feedback, what you know, because most of you are professional communicators, right? That's what you do as a senior leader of a church. You know exactly what to do when someone asks you a question and you say, hey, I heard your question and here's the answer to it. But you can't do that as a communicator unless you know what those questions are. And man, I've been part of campaigns before where senior leadership, senior pastor, they're all just kind of guessing what the people think or what the people want or what the people are confused about. We remove that guessing so you can have all of that in your hand, and so you know exactly how to communicate so that it just hits the spot for what people are wondering about. And then the second thing that as a result of kind of shaping it by the test is a financial target. Here's one of my biggest fears when it comes to coaching churches on these projects. If your congregation is able to give, pick a number, let's just keep using the number $500,000. And some of you, that's a lot of money. Some of you, that's a little money, but I'm just using it as an example. If your congregation is ready to give $500,000 extra money over the next couple of years, that is awesome. That is amazing that they would give that extra money and invest it in your church. But it doesn't feel awesome if you set the financial target at 5 million. So if churches come into this and say, well, the project is X amount of dollars and we really need $4 or $5 million, and so that's going to be our financial target, what's going to happen, senior leader? People who prayed and gave to the best of their ability are going to feel like it's a failure, when it actually wasn't a failure in giving per se, but it perhaps was a failure in target setting. So one of the things that experts in church fundraising can help you do, myself and our team, is help you set the target so that it feels appropriate and like a shepherd leads people in the way that feels right and appropriate to where they're at in their development and generosity. So if you have a $500,000 capacity from the congregation, you don't want to set that financial target much beyond that, because you want people to give and have a great experience and have a godly experience and have a memory that says, you know what, when our church raises money, it's great. It feels great. It feels like they've thought through it. It feels like they heard us and we really had a victory as a church. And so that's an important thing to me and to our team, which is why I sort of camped on it for a bit so that you could hear our heart on that matter. By the way, this is one of the tools. We got a lot of tools that we use to kind of help bring clarity. But one of the things that we always try to help you assess is when it comes to the project or projects, right? Sometimes you have a couple mixed into your capital campaign. One of the things we ask you to think through ahead of time, and I'm just giving you an example of kind of how we help, is we ask you on that project, is it a direct or indirect link to your vision? Here's what I mean by that. If you say that your vision is to reach the young families in your city with the gospel of Jesus and to connect them to our church, that's a pretty clear vision, right? But then you go to a capital campaign and you say, we need to raise money to fix the HVAC. Well, is that a direct or indirect link to your vision? Well, of course, it's an indirect link, right? You got to have proper, environment controls to have a great church so that it's inviting for people, but it's not as direct as if you said, and we're building a family center as an extra building on our campus. That's a direct link to a vision that says we're trying to reach young families. So again, both of those are worthy goals when it comes to raising money. If you need a new HVAC, you probably need to raise capital. And if you need a family center, you need to raise capital. But sometimes senior leaders kind of see those as equal in terms of their approach to raising capital and don't recognize, wait a second, you got to take more time with the average Greg in your congregation to say, Greg, here's why an HVAC is important to our vision, even though it doesn't seem like it at its face. So this is just an example of when you bring us in, or a professional faith-based fundraising group, they're going to help you with some of these communication techniques and tools so that you know kind of how to shape your messaging so that, again, it feels appropriate, authentic, transparent, and really guides people by the hand. Most people in a congregation aren't thinking like church leaders. I mean, that's not to be disparaging. That's not their job, right? It's our job as church leaders to be thinking out ahead, thinking in a visionary way, asking what resources will it take to fulfill that vision, and then walking people by the hand so that they don't feel jerked around with a capital campaign like it's just a money grab or it's simply transactional, but rather it feels like they're being part of the fulfillment of what our church was trying to do. Remember, the goal of it was that when we described this with such clarity and such connection with the why are we doing this? The response you want from the average member of the congregation is, well, of course we should give extra money to that. Not anything other than that, or anything that feels confusing or like they're being strong-armed. That's why we come at this with a pastoral approach and some of the tools to help you as senior leader or pastor raise money in a way that feels appropriate. So maybe you heard some things today that I'm talking fast and you're like, God, Greg, I wish you would have talked more about that or dove deeper into that, or tell me more about that assessment, or timing, man, I've got some timing questions, or Greg, I don't totally agree with your thing about the recession. Cool. I love this because I don't think this is science, right? I think it's a science and art. I think it's like experience, but also discernment from God's Spirit. And so to me, this is a dialogue and a discussion. So the special opportunity we have that is linked to today's webinar is the fact that you'll be invited. Just because you came to this one or signed up for this one, you'll be invited to hop on next week. And I'll go live again even a shorter amount of time, or maybe about the same amount of time, because we've kind of buttoned this one up in about a half an hour. I know I'm serving a church right now and don't need to be on webinars for hours and hours. So I'm trying to fire this at you and then give you an opportunity to interact with us both on email, of course, in the chat box right now, and then in a week from today. And what we're doing with that is any questions submitted during today's webinar will be addressed in a 30-minute follow-up webinar on Thursday, August 25, which is a week from today. Same time, same channel, and don't worry about it, you'll be invited to it. But here's why. One of the things that we know is when we interact with folks like you, the men and women that help lead churches, we can give you kind of macro principles and a sense for maybe encouraging you that there is a way forward, that we can help you with that way forward. And that way forward, by the way, may not even be running a capital campaign when you thought you were going to, but rather understanding better your congregation and when it would be appropriate to run a capital campaign. So I want you to hear me clearly. I'm not saying hire Oxano and you can run a campaign. What I'm saying is we want to help you discern and ascertain what is it that God is doing at your church and what is it that God is doing in your congregation in connection with your vision that you need to know as the church leader to be able to, again, shepherd them into a lovely experience of a capital campaign. When most people are like, I don't want to do a capital campaign. We're like, we love them because we think if you do them well, it again grows both finances and faith. And yet we don't want to be answering questions that you're not asking. So that's why I just wanted to give you this last minute opportunity to hop on the chat, email me at greg@oxano.com, or hop on next week when we'll do another 30 minutes together about raising capital in turbulent times. That's it for today. I hope this was helpful to you and encouraging to you and worth a half an hour of your time. And I look forward to responding to your questions next week or your emails as soon as we hang up here, greg@oxano.com. So really appreciate all the things that you do in your churches. As an Oxano team, we pray for you regularly and hope that we can help with this and other things that Oxano does to support churches. So bless you. Have a great day, and we'll talk to you very soon, many of you in a week. See you later.